This is a brief tutorial on how to access the benchmarking component of unique learning systems. First, you are going to find your way to the GPS student view, and let me show you how I did that. I click this button up here, we call that the hamburger, and I come to News to You GPS. That's under the Unique Learning Systems button, and I click on News to You GPS. And that is going to bring me to my student view. Now, I'm working with a sample student right now. You will probably have an array of students here, and when you scroll down, you'll be able to see all of their profiles. But we're starting with my one student, my sample student, and we're going to work on benchmarks. So you're going to click on this button that says benchmarks. Now, what is a benchmark? A benchmark is a baseline data piece that gives us an idea where a student is in their reading literacy, their writing literacy, their basic math literacy, just a baseline piece of data that tells us where they are at. So that is what you want to keep in mind when you're taking this baseline data or this benchmark, student benchmarks. The checkpoints are the piece of data that you take monthly that coincides with your monthly lessons with ULS. This is your benchmark piece or your baseline. So here we go. What we're going to do is we're going to come in here and you're going to see a huge list of all these things. All these things. There's very, very many skills in here. When you're selecting which skills you're going to use benchmarks for, you're not going to do all of them. That is not necessary. A lot of students aren't working on focused skills in all of these areas. For example, you're going to see very specific skills here. Let's say that your student has an IEP goal that is addition and subtraction world problems within 10. Well, then they're definitely going to take this assessment because this is a good benchmark piece of data for you to put in so that you can track their progress on this goal. So if they're working on this goal, this is going to be one of your probes that you use when you're putting the data in, and this is where you're going to put the data. So let's say you have a student who has that IEP goal. So-and-so will be able to solve addition problems with factors within 10 or something like that, that sort of thing. You're going to come in here to the guide, and you're going to click on that guide to open it up. And I definitely recommend, who do I recommend reading through this first? Because you do not want to be in the middle of the test and not really sure what answer is right, or obviously you know the answers to these, but let's be real. Once you get up into that algebra, and you might not be able to do it off the cuff, so get those answers, make sure you know what's right so that you can approach this with confidence for your student. It's going to tell you the questions, and then it's going to tell you the correct answer choices. So I have already looked over this one and I am ready to give this assessment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the assessment. See how it's gray? Click on that assessment. And it's going to bring you into this benchmark test. All right, so there's a couple options here. You can either do student view, teacher-led, or offline. Offline is going to allow you to administer that offline test and then use the scoring guide that you have in that PDF that I just showed you to take the data, right? So that's an option. Let's look at what happens if we click on that. All right, so it's going to give you some directions here. It says to access that PDF like we did, we opened it, administer the assessment offline, and once you're finished, you're going to put the data in and you can actually score it offline. That is one option. That is going to be the best option for some students. That is obviously self-explanatory. You're going to give it just like an assessment, right? Let's say that you want to do the teacher-led assessment, which is what I personally do when I'm taking live data. I'm going to pull up the teacher-led assessment. It's going to warn you that you're about to start this assessment for your sample student or whoever it is. You're going to launch that assessment. And then you're going to start it. All right, and then you're just going to read these questions. So, what is 2 plus 1? And it's going to give you some answer choices. Oh, look, here we go. Mia collects 2 shells. Jack collects 1 shell. How many shells do they have all together? All right, and the answer choices here are 2, 3, or 4. One of the reasons it's important to read that PDF ahead of time is if you have a student who needs adapted materials for these assessments, you're going to want to have those ready, right? So you're doing this benchmark test, and let's say you have a student who you know needs 6x6 picture symbols or 6x6 numbers, right? You're going to want to have that ready for them for when you're giving this test. This test is going to tell you which numbers you need and so on. So that's a good way to prepare. Let's say you have a student who needs visual choices. They need that 2, 3, and 4 option, but they need it with 2 circles on the bottom, 3 circles on the bottom, 4 circles on the bottom, that sort of thing. It all depends on if you have that student taking Extend 1 testing with adapted materials, you want to make sure you're adapting these materials too so that you're consistent in that. So let's just say in this world, we are giving this assessment to a student who doesn't need those adapted materials. They're taking it right on the computer, and that's totally fine. Or you have the materials and you're giving it to them separately, whatever. You know, it is what it is. So 2 + 1, I'm going to say that's 3. You're going to click next. All right, so 4 + 2. Brent plants 4 flowers. Jack plants 2 flowers. How many do they plant all together? So we got 4 + 2.
6.
So I'm going to go through real quick and I'm going to answer these questions. You get the idea. These are the type of questions that you're using as a benchmark piece of data to determine where the student is at as far as this skill is concerned. Addition and subtraction word problems within 10. So I'm going to pause right here. I'm going to finish this and I'm going to break. All right, so when you're finished with the assessment, it's going to say finished and you're going to click the button finish. All right, so test complete. So this is a really cool part that they added. The cool thing about this is you can actually add some anecdotal notes. Like let's say you got to question number 8 and your student fell asleep, right? And so you gave them no credit for each of the questions from 8 on. This is a great place to put so-and-so fell asleep at question number 8. So those 2 questions were invalid due to that reason. Or you can put a note that maybe this piece of data is skewed because the student fell asleep or because there was a behavior, that sort of thing. This is where you're going to put any anecdotal data, anything that happened that you think is of note during this assessment. There was a fire drill, literally anything that you think that you would normally put on your data because you think it's relevant. All right, and then you're going to save and exit. And then it's going to save that benchmark test. So now we know that the benchmark, the starting point for the student that we selected is 4 out of 10 in accuracy in regards to this skill. So with addition and subtraction problems within 10, they are able to do that skill with 4 out of 10% or 4 out of 10 accuracy, so 40%. And you can view this after you've done it. You can see their scores. If you need a printout of this data, this is a good piece of evidence, and it just shows you what they got wrong, what they got right. So next time they take it, you can compare how they did and, make informed decisions on your instruction, right? All right, so that is how you do a benchmark. I want to show you some other things with benchmarks. So that was a benchmark for an individual skill. When it comes to benchmarks for individual skills, that is more of an IEP benchmark. So you're going to take all their IEP goals. We know we have IEP goals in at least you're going to have math and reading, and you might have a written expression goal too. You're going to have academic data for those areas. So your goals, when you're writing them, they have to be standards-based, because if they're not standards-based, you're not going to find a benchmark for that goal in here. This is all standards-based. So that is how you determine the benchmark for like an IEP goal. All right, so here's what I would do too. This is what I've done in the past. I want to get a benchmark for reading, writing, and basic math overall. So I want a benchmark in each of these subject areas. I want a benchmark at the beginning of the year, and then I want to take another benchmark about mid-year, and then I want a benchmark at the end of the year. So these benchmarks you're not giving monthly. The ones I'm about to show you, you might be giving this one pretty frequently because this is the benchmark related to the IEP goal. So you might be giving this one monthly, but the other benchmarks are something that you're going to give beginning of year, middle year, end of year, just to see progress in those areas. So if you go to reading, it's going to isolate the reading skills. But if you come down here, you're going to see reading level assessment. And this is the one that you're going to want to give at the beginning of the year. So you're going to open that PDF again, take a look at it, make sure that you're familiar with the answer choices, the questions, that sort of thing. And then you're going to launch that test. All right. All right, so when you come into this, you're going to see that there are printable options for the books themselves. So if you have a student that would do better holding the book, having the testing materials in front of them, it has that for you. So when you click on printable version, you're going to see here is the printable version of the text, and you can actually print the story out and hand it to the student to have them access it that way. And there are 2 books here, and the different levels are A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, right? So if you have a student who is currently reading at a B level, you probably want to get a benchmark on that B level, and you might want to get a benchmark on the C level as well. Let's say you give a benchmark on the C level and the student does it with 2% or 20% accuracy. My next step would probably to go to that B level and see how they do at that B level. If they're doing the B level reading at like a 6% accuracy and the C reading at a 2% accuracy, and let's say they do the A level reading at 100% accuracy, well, you know they've mastered the A level. You know that the B level is probably the level that they're like currently working at, and you know the C level is probably their frustration level. So that's how you find those different levels where the student is at. So let's just say I've already given the C and I was like, ooh, we got a 1 out of 10 on the C. That was tough. Let's go back to the B. Now I'm giving my student the B, and we're going to see how we do on this. And I'm going to pick the book, Busy Day or Many Colors. Let's do Many Colors. And this is important. So admin method. Nonverbal or verbal. So just make sure that you have that when you're running the test. It depends on the student, right? All right, and this is going to tell you the skills that it can track for you. So what skill categories would you like to associate with this test? And if you click on it, like let's say you want them to work on decoding. Decoding is the skill, and you want to track this skill for the individual or add an individual skill to the tracking group. You can do it either way. But let's say I want to track this skill for the individual, right? So I want them to be working on decoding. And then I think I also would like them in this circumstance to be working on comprehension. All right, so I know what test I'm going to be working on, the story I'm going to read, and then I also know that I'm going to be working on decoding and comprehension. And the test is going to change based on what you select. So if you want to select all of these, you can. It can track all 4 skills. It depends on what you're looking at. Maybe your student is only working on comprehension questions, or that's the only thing that you want to track at this test. That is up to you. It depends on the individual student. All right, so verification code to ensure. All right, so we got to type the student's full name. Sample student 1. All right, and then you're going to see a test come up, and it's going to look a lot like Extend 1 testing, so get ready for that. The frog is green. And then they're going to fill in the blank. The blank is green. Is it the fan, frog, or car? Which one? Let's say they say fan. It's going to go to the next one. The apple is red. And then you're just going to go through this test with them. Now I'm just going through real quick. All right, and if you want to do any notes about that, anything that happened during the test, you can add that here. And you see the question down here, this indicates that you're reading that question, right? If you see it down there in gray, you're reading that question. We know with our students, we're going to be reading the questions. They all operate under Extend 1 testing, and we read the questions and the answer choices for them. That's how we roll. We know that that's not blanketly every student. Then you might have a student that reads their own questions. That's fine. But know that you can read these questions. But if you see it down in the gray, it's particularly not intended for them to read the question. So you'll be reading the question, what color is a cookie? Brown. What is black in the story? The shoe. What is orange in the story? The pumpkin. So this is, remember how we talked about how they wanted to, and our skills were decoding and comprehension. That first part of the test was the decoding. It was giving a piece of information and then having them do a fill in the blank question immediately after the piece of the information. That was your decoding piece. This is your comprehension piece. So now it's asking comprehension questions. What in the story has many colors? The rainbow. All right, so you got those two tests that track those two different skills. So now when you look at their test history, you are going to see that on this test, they got 33% accuracy, so this is their frustration level, and it tells you what that means. Books at this level are too difficult for the student to read. However, they may be appropriate for read alouds. That's very true. Comprehension, good. The student comprehends what is read at this level of book. So like perfect. It's telling you, hey, this is their frustration level. They're not going to be able to do this independently, but you should continue to work at this level for like read alouds and stuff like that. All right, so you have that piece of data. There's your benchmark data. All right. And now, if you look at these benchmark pieces of data and you choose to use these benchmark pieces of data as you go, like let's say you love benchmark data and you just want to work your way through all of them, that's fine. You can use this. This is great data. No data. I mean, there is such thing as bad data, but this is good data. These are great probes and they're appropriate for our students and they're easily adaptable. If you have to, they start out pretty adapted, but we know that we still have to do further adapting for our students with visual impairments, our students with hearing impairments, our students with combined, our students who don't necessarily have the stamina to make it through the whole test. Like we have to adapt certain things. We know that going into this, but this is about as adapted as it gets. So use these probes. If you're curious about putting a IEP goal into place and you're like, well, I'd really like to do an IEP goal about counting numbers and number identification, but I'm not sure where sample student is right now with that skill. Use that benchmark piece of data. And then at the new IEP, when you meet with the team, you can say, I noticed that so-and-so is working at a frustration level on counting and identifying numbers 0 to 10. I think this would be a great goal for them to work on getting to proficiency with. I think they're showing emerging skills with this particular skill. So there you have your benchmark piece of data and a reason for putting the IEP goal into place. All right, so use this tool. This tool is really cool. This will save you a lot of time and energy. It holds the data for you. It is truly a fantastic piece, an underused piece of unique learning systems. And I hope that helped you with the little tour of how to do these benchmarks. And I hope that you can use these to benefit you in the future.